Hello and welcome to the sixth video of the CSS HTML development. In this video we're going to be creating the file with CSS to complete our HTML and CSS art. Okay, before we start, let's have a quick look at what we'll be building. So we've already have the majority of the artwork done. In this video we're just going to be looking at how to make that flame, how to make that glow, and how to make that animation. So by the end of this video, the big aim is for you to be able to create the fire art using CSS. You will have a better understanding about the after property and how to use it. You'll be able to understand how to use the animation property in CSS and how we can use the transform property in CSS. Do remember the way that I like to do these videos is I'm going to be asking you tasks and challenges, and I would like you to try them first, and then once you've attempted them I'm going to show you how I did it, and then we can compare the results. Okay, so this is the plan that we created in our last video. I think this is a great way of helping us build the CSS that we're going to be adding to our artwork. Do remember, if you haven't followed the videos previously, you can get the current files from the description below. So you can download those files and then try and complete the task that I'm going to ask you to do. So the first task that I would like you to do is use the layout to add all the class selectors to the CSS file. So you need to add these within the CSS file. You need to add the fire, the orange, the yellow, the white, the animation, the glow, and we already have the mouth one there. So try and add that to the CSS file. After that, you need to look at how we've done this and try and add in the flex properties that you'll need for each of the class selectors. So you have to think about when do you need the flex properties and when you don't. Do remember I've helped you here by giving you some basic information on our layout. Task 3 is then use the absolute positioning to manually place the file location. So here we're not going to be using flex, we're going to be using the absolute positioning because we don't want the other boxes that we're adding into it to affect each other. So we can use absolute positioning to make sure that the other boxes that we're putting inside our container don't influence each other. Number 4, I would like you to use the create the glow container. So remember, in our modeling we had within that mouth that glow that emitted in the background. So I want you to try and think how you can do that, and I want you to try and use the after and filter. See if you can do that. Number 5, I want you to think about how can we make those fire shapes with the border radius and transform properties. And then number 6, use the animation property to make the animation. So in the animation container, try and use that animation property to make that flicker. So stop the video and see how many tasks you can do, and then once you've done them, let's see how your way compares with my way. So hopefully you've paused the video and you've attempted the tasks. I am now going to go through them and show you how I will do it. So for task 1, we need to create the class selectors. So I'm going to put the first one glow, and I'm just going to say this will have the glow properties in. The second one is the animation, so I'm going to pick the animation one. So this will have the animation properties. And then I'm going to create the fire. So this will, and then I'm going to create the orange I'm going to create the yellow, and I'm going to create the white class selector. Okay, so that is task 1 done. We've created all the CSS class selectors we need. So let's go on to our second task. Okay, so let's go to the second task. So the second task is adding the flex properties. Remember, flex is a method of organizing our containers. If you haven't or you don't have a good understanding of how to use flex, then you should watch my video on how we organize the CSS for the skeleton, and that will give you a much better understanding. So if we look at our layout, we want the glow container to have the flex property. So we're going to use display flex, and then we want it to be aligned both horizontally and vertically. So we want it to be center for both. If we look at animation, it's the same. We want it vertically and horizontally center, and we want to use the flex. So let's copy that down. With the fire, it's different because we're going to be using absolute positioning there to organize it. Again, if you don't understand why, go back to the skeleton CSS, and that'll give you a much better understanding of why we're using absolute positioning. And the orange, yellow, and white, we don't need the flex property there. That's just going to be explaining the height, width, and color. So we've done task 2. Okay, so let's go on to task 3. We're going to be positioning the fire now. So do remember that we're going to be using absolute positioning. Now, if you don't understand the difference of why I'm using this or what this does, I recommend you going back and looking at how I've created this CSS skeleton, because I go into much more depth about this. Now, because it is located in the animation one, and the animation is flex and it's got center and center, they're all going to be dead in the center. Now, we don't want them all in the center, we want them all at the bottom. So we need to change the bottom and add a value here. So let's just say 10 for now. So what this does is they'll all start at the bottom there, so it'll center it there. So all the files will be located at that position. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth task, which is a little bit harder now. So we want to create that glow. So let's first make the height and width of it. So we know the mouth has a height of 340 and we know the width is 350. So let's get the height and just put it 300, and we put the width, let's say 300 as well. We then want to make it a circle. So to make it a circle, we put the border radius. Again, we've used all these before, so there's nothing special here. And we want it like an orange background color, so let's put it orange. Now we want it to be slightly transparent and for it to be slightly blurry, so we can use a filter here. So let's blur it. So we can use a blur it here, and let's make it transparent. Now we have to be careful a little bit here, because when you add the filter, if you do it like this, what'll happen is there's only one filter property, so it will be rewritten. So this blur won't actually come into effect. So if you want two properties to happen, you need to put it on one line. See, we need to say the first aspect of that filter is going to blur it, and then we're going to make it transparent. Okay. However, this creates a problem, because what will happen is that all the boxes, containers within will also be blurred. So what we need to do is actually we need to create an after property. So it's not attached to the main glow container, it's attached to the end of it, so it doesn't affect any of the other containers. So we actually have to create a new class selector. So we're going to call it glow to match on, and we're just going to say after. Now here, this is where we can add our properties. Now usually when we do this we have to add content, but we don't want any content, so I'm going to leave this blank. But when you use after, you'll have to add some content to it. Now we don't want it being affected by the previous container, the glow container. So we have to try and disattach it from the current flex properties that we've been using. And a way to do that is just by saying, well, we're going to use the positioning absolute. So it's going to be dead center because of the flex properties, but it's not going to be affected by the glow container. Now we need to put in this information here. So we're saying the height is 300, the width is 300. It's going to be a circle, it's going to be orange, and it's going to have these two filters. However, we still need to add a width and height to this. So what we can do here is we can just say auto. So you could make it the same, but if you put auto here, you can adjust it here and it'll automatically change there. So that should be enough for the fourth task. So let's go on to the fifth one. Okay, so the fifth task is to try and make that fire shape. Now if we go down to the fire property, again, what we want to try and do is we want to try and make a circle, and then for the majority of the shape, but then still one box going up, so it's like a tier shape. So we can use the border radius, and we say we want the first corner to be 50%, so that means that will turn into a circle. We want the second corner to be 0, so it still maintain that corner. We want the third corner to be a circle, and the fourth corner to be a circle. So again, it'll create that pear-shaped. So you can use that body radius to do that. However, at the moment, it's still going to it's not going to be straight, because again, the corner is at the corner. We want the corner facing upwards, so it looks like that fire. So we have to transform that shape. Yeah, and we have to transform it by rotating. We have to rotate the angle, and so I know that we can rotate it by negative 45 degrees to get that fire shape. Now you can play around with this, but to get used to it, but this is how we can make that fire shape. So we're using the border radius to make that circle, but maintaining one corner, and then we're rotating the whole shape so that corner is facing up. And so that is how we've made our fire shape. Okay, so we've done half of task 5, and the other half is to create the unique shape or size and color for these individual files. So let's look at orange. So because the box that we've put it in, the main box is 300, we don't want it to be bigger than that. So let's put it as 200. Width the same, let's put it at 200. Let's put the background color as orange, and let's make a little bit of a border, so we can use a box shadow. And this box shadow, the first value is whether it's how it's going to be aligned. I think horizontally, so we want it on the line. The second value is how it's going to be aligned vertically. The third value is whether we want it to be blurred, so we do want it to be blurred, so I've put 12 there to be a little bit blurry. The next value is how much spread do we want it, so do we want the border to be quite big or quite small, so we want it to be a little big. And then the last value can be what kind of color do you want it. So I've just gone online and searched for CSS colors, so let's try and use dark orange for it. So I'm going to add dark orange to that border. And so that's the orange file. The same with the yellow one. So let's add a height. This has to be a little smaller than the orange one. So let's set it for 140. The width 140. The background color, I'm going to put gold. And then the box shadow, again, I'm going to do very similar, but maybe have it slightly less blurry and a slightly smaller spread. And the color, let's have it as light yellow. No, let's have it as gold. And the last one, the white, same thing. We put the height. This has to be a little bit smaller. Width a little bit smaller. The background color, I'm going to go with light yellow because it looks kind of whitish. And I'm going to go for the box shadow, the same as the one above. Little blur and a little spread, and I'm going to do light yellow. Okay, so that should make the fire exactly how we want it to look. So now we go on to the last one, the challenge, which is to make the animation. Okay, so the last task is task 6, which is to make the animation. So let's go back to the animation box, and we need to use the animation property. Oh, that's not the right box. Here it is. So we need to use animation here. Now the first animation property is the name, so let's call it flicker. So that is the name that we're going to create, the animation name we're going to create. The second property that we're going to be using is how long it's going to last. So it's going to last 600 milliseconds. The third one is how are we going to start the animation. So we're going to ease into it, so it's not going to be a rush start, it's going to be a slow start. There are loads of properties that you can use. I would recommend you going and having a look at this animation property and things that you can do. And then we need to know how many times are we going to go round. So we want to do it the infinity, so we're going to keep going round. Now we need to now call this flicker animation, that we have to create this animation. So we're going to go down to the bottom here and we're going to create it. So we need to create the keyframes. So again, we're going to say we're going to use keyframes. So these are the keyframes for our animation, and then we have to match it up to that animational name. So what we're going to do is, when it's at 0% of this animation, what are we going to do? So because we just want it to kind of flicker slightly, we can use rotation and scaling to make that animation. So for example, the first one, we're going to transform it and we're going to rotate it, and we're only going to rotate it by -1 degrees. Okay, so at the beginning of the animation it rotates slightly, and then 20% through that's 600 milliseconds, we're going to rotate it again. So again, we're going to use transform and rotate, and we're going to rotate it maybe 2 degrees, so we're going to go the opposite way. But we're also going to make it a little bigger, so we can use the scale. Now we can choose scale, which will make it both vertically bigger and horizontally bigger, or we can choose one or the other. So if we're going to look at the y-axis here, and that will make it vertically a little bit bigger. So let's say if we put 1.3, that will make it 30% larger. So at 20%, so 20% of, into that animation, we're going to rotate it 2 degrees, and then we're going to make it larger by 30% because we're increasing it by 0.0. Then let's say 40%. Let's rotate it again. So let's rotate it backwards. So we're just going to be pushing it back and forth. So we've got 60%. And let's rotate it forward. So we're trying to create that flame flicker. And then 80%. Let's do it the other way. So let's transform it so it's -2 degrees, and then instead of increasing it, let's decrease it vertically by 0.9. So that'll decrease it by 10%. And then the last one, which is 100%. Let's rotate it back 1 degrees. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that animation works. So we have created the animation here. That's the name. So it matches up. It's saying this is the length of time, but in the animation it splits that time into segments. And it's saying, well, how does it ease into them? So there are many different ways you can do that. I'm going to be easing in. So it's going to be a slow transition between the others. And then it's how many times am I going to do this animation? Well, it's going to keep going round and round and round. So hopefully, let's see if all that works. We should have created all the tasks, and hopefully we've created that fire in the skeleton's mouth. So let's have a quick look. Okay, so if we open it up, let's have a see. Okay, so there is a little bit of a problem with the layout. So we need to have a look at that and fix that. However, we can see that the animations go in. We can see that the background here is blurred and slightly transparent. We can see the shapes have all worked quite well. We can see the different colors and the box shadow. So we've got a lot right. However, there's an issue with our fire being too high up. So let's go back and look at why. So we have the glow, and the glow seems to be working well. Within the glow we have the animation. Okay, what I think is the problem is because the animation box, because we haven't set the size of it, what's happened is that the animation box is very small here, and so that the flame, even though it's at the bottom, is only here. So what we need to do is make the animation box the same size as the glow box. So let's copy that down. I suppose we only need the height. So let's save that and let's reopen that. Yeah, there you go. So because the animation box was very small, didn't contain anything, it was located up here. So even though the fire was at the bottom, it was still positioned too high. So we added the height for the animation, and then it pushed the fire down. If you wanted the flicker is maybe a little bit too big because it's coming out of the mouth, if you don't like that, we can maybe reduce it to 1.1. Again, if we save that and open it up again, it will change and reduce the size it's increasing. But overall, I think we have created the artwork that we wanted. Hopefully you've learned a little bit by stopping the videos and trying the tasks yourself. If that requires you going online and researching, I'm all for that. I think trying to work out problems yourself before seeing the answer, I think, is a very good learning method. I'm going to stop the video here, and then my next video I'm going to ask some questions to see how much knowledge you consolidated. So I'm going to be asking you some concept questions, so concept checking questions, and then that will be the last video in this series. Okay, so thank you for watching the video. If you found this useful at all, please subscribe, because I will have a number of projects that I want to continue to do. My next video, or the future videos that I'll be doing for this series, or the last video that I'll be doing in this series, is talking about questions on the knowledge that we've learned so far, including the flex display, absolute positioning, the CSS animation property, the transform property, and the after. So the last video is just going to be me asking a series of questions so you can answer them and consolidate all the knowledge that we've learned in this series. So if you are interested in that, please subscribe so that I will notify you when the video is uploaded. So thank you very much and goodbye.